Welcome to another English Sparkling with Tweedy video. By the standards of English wine producers, fairly high profile English wine producer that I don't think I've featured before, Hambledon. They are based down in Hampshire, and as it says on the back of the label, this is actually Britain's oldest commercial vineyard. I think you could say they were at the forefront of the Renaissance, I would like to call it, of English winemaking, because of course there is a history of English winemaking going back to Roman times potentially, but certainly medieval times we had some sort of winemaking in this country. 1952 Hambledon was established. Nice terroir in Hampshire, lots of chalky soil and all that. Relatively at the sort of budget end comparatively for English sparkling. I forget the exact price, I'll put it on screen if it matters. It's a while since I've had this. I remember it being, you know, okay, but not something I've bought very often. So I'm interested to revisit it and see what it's like. It's a non-vintage, I believe. Don't think there's any vintage statement on there. There is some kind of code on the back, so I don't know if there's some way of looking that up. The grapes are listed as Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, which suggests to me there is more Chardonnay here than anything else. Correspondingly, well, I don't know, it's not a particularly pale colour, sort of pale gold. Nice, sort of, yeah, goldy kind of colour, I like that. On the nose, sort of appley notes, I would say. Possibly a hint of baked apple there. And there is some kind of hint of something which I assume comes from autolytic influence from that time on the lees. Usually something in the bakery department, isn't it? Going slightly pastry-ish here, maybe. This is definitely a profile I find quite a lot of in Hampshire, that kind of baked apple pie, essentially. Baked apple for the fruit character and sort of pastry-like note from the autolytic character. Maybe a hint dried fruit in there? Baked apple pie with some raisins thrown in, is that a thing? Nice bit of appley zing. There we have fresher, I'd say green apple, but maybe there's a hint of red there as well. Crunchy, zingy, appley sort of acidity. That is crisper and more precise than I recall it being previously. My last recollection of Hambledon was a little bit on the light side, but that has a sort of really attention-grabbing zing and crispiness to it. I think there's some mineral notes in there. I feel I'm repeating myself, a bit of minerality. I quite like the balance there. Definitely a bit of sweetness, really nicely carried by that zing. A good long finish from the acidity there. Quite a nice texture, quite mouth-watering. Nice fine bubbles. Actually nicer than I remember it. Zingy, mouth-watering, refreshing. It's good. I'm happy with that. Possibly not the most complex or nuanced of English sparkling wines, but does it need to be? They do also make something like a Premier Cuvee. I assume that's a more complex version of this. I have had that before, a long time ago, can't really remember what it was like. I'm getting a little bit more of Chardonnay character. Sometimes there are sort of buttery notes around the edges with Chardonnay. I almost wonder if this has possibly had a little bit of oak contact. Sometimes I think that interaction with Chardonnay and oak can produce sort of vanilla-y and or buttery sort of notes. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of that now, yeah. More sort of buttery, and that plays into the pastry and the autolytic character there. It's actually quite smart, really. Always quite like that buttery note. Gives it an air of sophistication. Baked apple pie. Quite a sophisticated apple pie, I think, actually, and a lot of zing, fresher fruit on the palate. I'm really enjoying that. Cheers.